see you from.
For those of you who never watched it, Blue's Clues is a show for young children that was created back in 1996. It lasted for 10 years with a total of 6 seasons and 142 episodes. The show involved a guy named Steve, or Joe, depending on which seasons you're watching, looking for clues and solving mysteries with help from the audience. Blue was an animated dog who labels the clues with her paw prints. Blue's Clues was a hit with many little kids, including me. The idea was original and the artwork was amazing. However, Steve Burns, the guy who played Steve, was the backbone of the show. Steve Burns was the actor who played Steve. He was more serious than Barney the dinosaur. But he loved kids, and he knew exactly how to make them happy. There was just something magical about his enthusiasm that made me want to watch more and more of the episodes. Sadly, he left the show in 2002, the year I was born, and pursued a musical career. Steve was replaced by a man named Donovan Patton, who's the actor for Joe. But it wasn't the same. A lot of people stopped watching Blue's Clues after Steve left. Most people thought the show just lost its magic. Now, I do have to admit, Joe was nothing like Steve. Unlike Steve, Joe is a total goofball. And even my friends said that he was acting too hard. One day, I was 16. My family moved to a large 3-story house in upstate New York that was previously owned by a nice old lady. A few weeks after moving in, I decided to do some exploring in the attic. I found an old trunk. To my surprise, it was filled with a bunch of old VHS tapes. All of them were Blue's Clues tapes. I knew the old lady's cell phone number, so I decided to call her and ask her about the tapes. She told me that she bought them from a collector a few years back for her little grandson to watch. After I thanked her and hung up, I emptied the trunk before checking the tapes. All of them had episodes that I have already watched. except for one. The one tape I found had a regular sticker, not a factory sticker like the other tapes. Had the title on the you see, the title on the sticker was Blue's Clues Sorrow. I thought the title was a little strange, but I figured it was just a copy of the Steve Goes to College episode. The one where Steve goes out to college and Joe takes his place. Because Steve said goodbye to all of his friends in that episode. I considered it to be very sorrowful indeed. Well, my parents went on their anniversary trip and left me in charge of the house one night. Figured it was the perfect opportunity to check out the tape. Our TV has a VCR, and I have to admit, I felt a little tingle of excitement when I put the tape in the player. I was about to relive my childhood memories of watching Blue's Clues. I didn't care that I was too old to watch it. I knew for sure I would enjoy it. At least, the episode started off completely normal. Blue's Clues book opened up and Steve looked out the window of his little yellow house. Hi out there! It's me, Steve. Have you seen Blue? Wait. She's not here. Well, come on in. Front door opened and Steve was in the living room. You know, with the thinking chair and the picture frame and the side table drawer with the telephone. But he looked concerned. He said, I need to tell you something important. Blue is at the vet. She's having an operation on her heart and I hope she's okay. Steve stopped talking and looked down at the floor. The scene ended. The next scene shows Steve at the vet. He sat in the waiting room without making a sound. Nothing but stare at the doors which led into the operating rooms. The surgeon opened a door. She wasn't an animated character. She was a real person. She whispered in Steve's ear, but I could hear everything she said. She said, her heart stopped beating. We tried our best. We couldn't get it to beat again. I'm sorry. The scene ended. The next scene started with a title card saying that a month had passed after Blue's funeral. A deep voice spoke. There are 5 stages in the grieving process. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, the voice said. Steve will experience 3 stages all at once. Depression, anger, and mental illness. Not mental illness? What? You see, Steve was in the bedroom, lying in bed. He began to cry. And the color of the episode turned black and white, like a depressing old photograph. Steve was crying so hard, and his breathing grew shallow. the scene ended. The next scene showed Steve sitting up on his bed. He stopped crying. His face was now red, and his teeth was clenched tightly. Steve held his stuffed anteater, Horace, with both hands, and he screamed, "Whoa!" at the top of his lungs. His scream sent chills down my spine. Steve ripped off Horace's head, and black ooze comes squish out of the stuffed animal's neck. Steve threw Horace in a fit of rage. When the anteater landed, its ooze completely covered the floor. I fought the urge to vomit. Against my better judgment, I decided to keep watching. Steve's body began to turn darker by the second. After about 5 seconds, Steve turned completely black. He got up out of bed, walked out of the bedroom, and walked into his living room. I thought he was going to sit in that big red thinking chair. He didn't. He stood in front of the chair and stared at the screen for a full minute. His eyes lost their pupils. There were nothing but white dots. He started to cry again. White tears streamed down his face. Some sad piano music began to play. The music was so heartbreaking, I shed a few tears myself. A message flashed across the screen. It said, "You can figure out Blue's clues that you can't figure out insanity." The scene ended. The next scene showed Steve still in the living room. He was no longer crying, and his body was completely normal. He said, "I can't live without Blue. She was my best friend. She gave my life happiness and meaning. Without her, I have nothing to live for." And the kids in the background that helped Steve find the clues started to cry and whimper. They shouted, "Please don't do it, Steve! We love you! We're your friends too!" "I'm sorry," Steve said. "I'm sorry if I break your heart for doing this. But I have no choice." Bye. He held up a container. The camera zoomed in on the label, which said potassium cyanide. Steve had a calm look on his face as he swallowed the contents of the container. He instantly collapsed on the carpet. He foamed at the mouth, while his body twitched and threshed on the floor, like he was being electrocuted. Steve eventually stopped moving, and I knew him. He got killed. The episode finally ended as my TV cuts to static. I sat still, dazed. It took my friend a few minutes to comprehend what I had just watched. I made the decision then and there to play detective and find out where in the world this episode come from. I looked at the name of the episode online, but came up with nothing. I knew that the company, Viacom, owned Blue's Clues because their company name was shown on the factory stickers on all the VHS tapes. After a bit of research, I wrote a letter to the Viacom headquarters. I told them about my experience and asked them if they knew where the tape came from. 2 weeks later, I got a reply in the mail. Dear Mr. Thank you for taking the time to write this. We were quite surprised by a story about the unaired episode of Blue's Clues that you discovered. We are grateful that you contacted us concerning it. We can personally assure you that Viacom Media Networks, as well as Viacom, claims no ownership or liability whatsoever regarding this episode. However, we still feel that our explanation is in order. Unfortunately, we are unable to provide details of the tape's creation, as we simply do not know how this happened. Back in 2002, we received a VHS tape in a package with no return address. The words Mr. Ted were written on the package, along with the tape. There was a letter from Mr. Ted stating that he was the biggest fan of Blue's Clues, and he asked for our approval to air his fan-made creation on television. We were quite flattered that a fan would send us a fan-made episode for airing. However, when our editors viewed the episode for refinement, they were quite appalled by its nature. A few of the staff who viewed the episode unbelievably went into shock and had to transport it to the emergency room immediately. Due to the horrifying content, we have absolutely no plans to air the episode. We passed the tape to a private collector, but we are dismayed to discover they have made many copies made. We ask that you please do not release the contents of the tape or this letter to the public, as we do not want to upset the viewers who love and support our show for young children. Warm regards, Dr. Michael D. Frickius, Executive Vice President, Journal Counsel, and Secretary. Questions around inside my head were bouncing. They still do to this day. Who's Mr. Ted? How was he able to create this demonic episode? Is he even human? Out of respect for Viacom, I'm afraid I cannot provide any footage. However, I figured releasing a single screenshot and a copy of the letter to the public wouldn't make them too angry. You're probably wondering, why are you telling me this? What's the point of the story? To be honest, I just wanted to get it off my chest. I've been keeping it a secret for a little while. I eventually felt the desire to tell someone, whether they believe me or not. A part of my brain told me to throw away the tape and the letter. I have kept both in my closet to remind me what I experienced was real. I now realize that some so-called fans of TV shows are not as normal as you might think they are.